Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to be reading yet more Moby Dick. So let's get going. Today we're going to be reading 2 chapters because they are fairly short. We should be able to get through them no problem. So here we go. Chapter 69. The Funeral. Haul in the chains. Let the carcass go astern. The vast tackles have now done their duty. The peeled white body of the beheaded whale flashes like a marble sepulchre. Though chained in hue, it has not perceptibly lost anything in bulk. It is still colossal. Slowly it floats more and more away, the water round it torn and splashed by the insatiate sharks, and the air above vexed with rapacious flights of screaming fowls, whose beaks are like so many insulting poignards in the whale. The vast white headless phantom floats further and further from the ship, and every rod that it so floats, what seem square roots of sharks and cubic roods of fowls, augment the murderous din. For hours and hours from the almost stationary ship that hideous sight is seen. Beneath the unclouded and mild azure sky, upon the fair face of the pleasant sea, wafted by the joyous breezes, that great mass of death floats on, till lost in infinite perspectives. There's a most doleful and most mocking funeral. The sea vultures all in pious mourning, the air sharks all punctiliously, in black or speckled. In life but few of them would have helped the whale, I ween, if peradventure he had needed it. But upon the banquet of his funeral they most piously do pounce. O horrible vulturism of earth, from which not the mightiest whale is free. Nor is this the end. Desecrated as the body is, a vengeful ghost survives and hovers over it to scare, espied by some timid man-of-war or blundering discovery vessel from afar. When the distance obscuring the swarming fowls, nevertheless still shows the white mass floating in the sun, and the white spray heaving high against it. Straightway the whale's unharming corpse, with trembling fingers, is set down in the log, shoals, rocks, and breakers hereabouts. Beware, and for years afterwards, perhaps, ships shun the place, leaping over it as silly sheep leap over a vacuum, because their leader originally leaped there when a stick was held. There's your law of precedents. There's your utility of traditions. There's the story of your obstinate survival of old beliefs never bottomed on the earth, and now not even hovering in the air. There's orthodoxy. Thus, while in life the great whale's body may have been a real terror to his foes, in his death his ghost becomes a powerless panic to a world. Are you a believer in ghosts, my friend? There are other ghosts than the Cock Lane one, and far deeper men than Dr. Johnson who believe in them. Chapter 70. The Sphinx. It should not have been omitted that previous to completely stripping the body of the Leviathan, he was beheaded. Now the beheading of the sperm whale is the scientific anatomical feat, upon which experienced whale surgeons very much pride themselves, and not without reason. Consider that the whale has nothing that can properly be called a neck. On the contrary, where his head and body seem to join, there, in that very place, is the thickest part of him. Remember also that the surgeon must operate from above, some 8 or 10 feet intervening between him and his subject, and that subject almost hidden in a discoloured, rolling, and oftentimes tumultuous and bursting sea. Bear in mind, too, that under these untoward circumstances he has to cut many feet deep in the flesh, and in that subterraneous manner, without so much as getting one single peep into the ever-contracting gash thus made. He must skilfully steer clear of all adjacent interdicted parts, and exactly divide the spine at a critical point, hard by its insertion into the skull. Do you not marvel, then, at Stubbs' boast, that he demanded but 10 minutes to behead a sperm whale? When first severed, the head is dropped astern and held there by a cable till the body is stripped. That done, if it belong to a small whale, it is hoisted on deck to be deliberately disposed of. But with a full-grown leviathan, this is impossible. For the sperm whale's head embraces nearly 1/3 of his entire bulk, and completely to suspend such a burden as that, even by the immense tackles of a whaler, this were as vain a thing as to attempt weighing a Dutch barn in jeweller's scales. The Pequod's whale being decapitated and the body stripped, the head was hoisted against the ship's side, about half-way out of the sea, so that it might yet in great part be buoyed up by its native element, and there with the strained craft steeply leaning over to it, by reason of the enormous downward drag from the lower masthead, and every yard-arm on that side projecting like a crane over the waves. There that blood-dripping head hung to the Pequod's waist, like the giant Holofernes from the girdle of Judith. When this last task was accomplished, it was noon, and the seamen went below to their dinner. Silence reigned over the before tumultuous but now deserted deck. An intense copper calm, like a universal yellow lotus, was more and more unfolding its noiseless, measureless leaves upon the sea. A short space elapsed, and up into this noiselessness came Ahab, alone from his cabin. Taking a few turns on the quarter-deck, he paused to gaze over the side. Then slowly getting into the main chains, he took Stubb's long spade, still remaining there after the whale's decapitation, and striking it into the lower part of the half-suspended mast, placed its other end crutchwise under one arm, and so stood, leaning over with eyes attentively fixed on this head. It was a black and hooded head, and hanging there in the midst of so intense a calm, it seemed the sphinxes in the desert. "Speak, thou vast venerable head," muttered Ahab, "which thou ungarnished with a beard, yet here and there lookest hoary with mosses. Speak, mighty head, and tell us the secret thing that is in thee. Of all divers thou hast dived the deepest. That head upon which the upper sun now gleams has moved amid this world's foundations, where unrecorded names and navies rust, and untold hopes and anchors rot, where in her murderous hold this frigate earth is ballasted with bones of millions of the drowned. There in that awful water land, there was thy most familiar home. Thou hast been where bell or diver never went, hast slept by many a sailor's side, where sleepless mothers would give their lives to lay them down. Thou sawest the locked lovers when leaping from their flaming ship, heart to heart they sank beneath the exulting wave, true to each other when heaven seemed false to them. Thou sawest the murdered mate when tossed by pirates from the midnight deck. For hours he fell into the deeper midnight of the insatiate maw, and his murderers still sailed on unharmed, while swift lightnings shivered the neighbouring ship that would have borne a righteous husband to outstretched longing arms. O head, thou hast seen enough to split the planets and make an infidel of Abraham, and not one syllable is thine. "Sail ho!" cried a triumphant voice from the main masthead. "Aye? Well, now, that's cheering," cried Ahab, suddenly erecting himself, while whole thunderclouds swept aside from his brow. That lively cry upon this deathly calm might almost convert a better man. "Where away?" "3 points on the starboard bow, sir, and bringing down her breeze to us." "Better and better, man. Would now St. Paul would come along that way, and to my breezelessness bring his breeze. O nature, and O soul of man, how far beyond all utterance are your linked analogies! Not the smallest atom stirs or lives on matter, but has its cunning duplicate in mind." Well, with that, we come to the end of those 2 chapters, and to the end of this particular episode. So, what I'm actually going to do is say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we'll be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.